Hello, everyone. Thank you once again for joining in. It's been a little tight schedule today. You had one session already done, and this is the second session for today. Today's session is on decoding visual cognition from photons to perception, and our respected speaker is Umut Kerem Özen. Umut, I hope I pronounced your name rightly. So, without wasting any more time, I would like to kindly you to start. Over to you.
All right. Uh, Let me share my presentation. I hope that you are able to see the presentation. Um, all right. Give me a second. So, welcome everyone to Decoding Visual Cognition from Photons to Perception. Before we dive into the deep biology of how we see, let me take a moment to introduce myself and explain why I'm this one standing here talking you about the human eye. My name is Umut Kerem Özen. I am the co-founder of Synapses ABIs, where my team and I build advanced brain interfaces. Every day, we work with technologies like EEG, fNIRS, fMRI, and deep learning models to do something that genuinely sounds like science fiction. We decode neural data to build mind-reading solutions. In other words, we work on the back end of human cognition, taking the electrical firestorms inside the brain and translating them into interpretable commands, thoughts, and intent. And in this line of work, you quickly come face to face with a profound truth. The human brain is the most sophisticated, the most complex, and frankly, the most baffling computer in existence. And perhaps its single most impressive processing unit is the visual system, which is exactly why we are here today. These are the overall overview of the presentation. Uh, we will start with the grand illusion and end with the predictiveness of the human brain. I want to begin today by challenging an assumption, one that almost every one of us makes every single second of our waking lives. When you open your eyes in the morning, you the world simply appears instantly, effortlessly, in breathtaking detail. And because that experience feels so seamless, we naturally assume our eyes work like cameras. The cornea is the lens, the retina is the sensor, the optic nerve is the cable, streaming a perfect live video into the hard drive of our memory. It's a beautiful, intuitive model. It's also completely wrong. If your eyes really were cameras, the manufacturer would recall them. Consider this. Right in the middle of your visual field, there is a hole, a literal gap. It's called the optic disc, the spot where the optic nerve exits the eyeball. There are no photoreceptors there at all. You are completely blind in that spot. And yet, look around the room right now. Do you see two gaping black holes floating in front of you? Of course not. It gets stranger. Your sharp, high resolution vision is astonishingly tiny. Only a microscopic patch of your retina, the fovea, captures fine detail. Stretch your arm out and look at your thumbnail. That's the size of high definition window you're working with. Everything beyond it is blurry, distorted, and nearly colorblind. On top of all that, your eyes are never still. They flick and jerk constantly in rapid movements called saccades. If a camera shoot the way your eyes do, the footage would make you physically ill. So here's a question that drives everything we'll discuss today. If your eyes are this flawed, why is your experience of the world so stable, so vibrant, so seamless? The answer is this. Seeing is not a passive recording. It's an active, relentless act of construction. The photons entering your eye carry no meaning. They carry only raw data. Everything else, everything you actually see, is built by your brain. Let's follow that journey from a single photon all the way to conscious perception. So, our journey begins at the speed of light, about 300,000 kilometers per second. Electromagnetic radiation in the narrow band of wavelengths we call visible light bounces off every surface around you. It passes through your cornea, gets focused by your lens, and projects onto a delicate paper-thin tissue at the back of your eye, the retina. But the retina isn't just a screen. Here's something remarkable. The retina is actually an outgrowth of the central nervous system. It's basically part of your brain. It's quite literally a piece of your brain that migrated out into your eye during embryonic development. Its primary job is something called sensory transduction, translating physics into biology. Because your brain cannot read light waves, it only understands one language, electrical impulses and chemical signals, so the light has to be translated. To do this, the retina uses around 120 to 130 million photoreceptors, and they come in two types. First, the rods, roughly 120 million of them. They are extraordinarily sensitive. A single rod can respond to a single photon of light. They work in dim conditions and are finely tuned to detect motion, but they can't see color. Their detail resolution is poor. They cluster in your peripheral vision. This is why on a dark night you can spot a faint star out of the corner of your eye, but the moment you look straight ahead, you can't see it. Second, the cones. As you can see here, around 6 million of them we have. These are your high definition specialists. They need bright light to fire, and they give you color vision in three types: tuned red, green, and blue. They are packed densely into the fovea, that tiny central point of the sharpest focus. Now, let's stop right here. Wait a minute. Now, here is a bizarre evolutionary quirk. Your retina is wired backward. The photoreceptors sit at the very back of the retinal stack. So light has to pass through layers of neurons, blood vessels, and supporting tissue before it ever reaches the rods and cones. Once the photoreceptors catch the light, they trigger a chemical cascade. That signal travels forward through intermediate cells, bipolar cells, and horizontal cells, which already begin processing contrast and edges right there inside the eye. Then it reaches the ganglion cells, whose long fibers bundle together to form the optic nerve. But as that signal leaves the eye, we hit our first major engineering problem. Because of the simple physics of a lens, the image projected onto your retina is upside down and flipped left to right. Your retina is staring at a flat, two-dimensional, inverted mirror image projection of reality. So the instant that raw signal leaves the optic nerve, the brain has to start decoding, just to turn your world right side up again, because this is all flipped vertically and horizontally. Once those electrical impulses leave your eyes, they travel deep into the center of the skull. And here the sorting begins. First, the signals reach a literal crossroads called optic chiasm. And something elegant happens here. The brain does not simply send the left eye to one side and right eye to the other. Instead, it splits the visual field down in the middle. Everything in your left field of view from both eyes is routed to the right hemisphere of your brain. Everything in your right field of view goes to the left hemisphere. The split happens seamlessly. So each half of the brain handles the opposite of half of the world. Um, think of the from the chasm, those sorted pathways arrive at a structure buried deep in the thalamus, the lateral geniculate nucleus, the LGN. Think of the LGN as a highly sophisticated pastel sorting facility. It has 6 layers, as you can see right here, and its organization is beautiful. It separates the incoming signals by where they come from and what kind of information they carry. Layers 1 and 2 are the magnocellular layers. They handle fast-moving, low-contrast information, vital for detecting motion and sudden threats. Layers 3 through 6 are the provicular layers. They handle high-resolution detail and color. But here's the twist. The LGN is not a passive relay. In fact, it receives more feedback connections coming back from the visual cortex than forward connections coming in from the eyes. Think about that. Even at this early gateway, the brain is already telling the incoming data what to prioritize before the signal ever reaches conscious awareness. So this is not a simple relay, as you can see, because brain keeps telling to what to look for here. From the LGN, the signals travel along pathways called optic radiations straight to very back of your head, the primary visual cortex, the occipital lobe. It's also called V1 or striated cortex. If you have ever been bumped hard on the back of your head and seen stars, that's because you physically jarred the neurons in your V1, by the way. But when the signal first arrives at V1, the brain still doesn't see an object. No tree, no car, no face, nothing. Instead, V1 behaves like graphic cards taking an image down into raw code. In the 1960s, two researchers, David Hubble and Thorsten Wiesel, won a Nobel Prize for discovering just how picky these neurons are. One neuron fires only when it detects a line tilted at, say, 45 degrees in one specific spot. Another fires only for horizontal edge, another only when a line moves from left to right. So your brain takes the rich visual world and shatters it into an abstract sketch, made entirely of tiny lines, edges, orientations, and contrast boundaries. Which raises obvious question, how does this jigsaw puzzle of fragments ever get stitched back into the meaningful world? For that, we step onto the neural superhighways. Once V1 has parsed the world into raw geometric sketches, it passes that information forward, but the task ahead is enormous. The brain has to work out what something is and where it is at the very same time. So it splits the workload into two massive parallel pathways. As you can see, the blue one and the green ones. In cognitive science, we call this dual stream hypothesis. Let's start with the ventral stream, the what pathway, the one you can see with the green one in the graphic. This one travels downward from the occipital lobe into the temporal lobe. As information flows along it, each region analyzes increasingly complex features, from simple lines to shapes to patterns to color constancy. Finally, it reaches the inferior temporal cortex, which houses specialized modules for recognizing specific categories of objects. The most famous of these is the fusiform face area, the FFA. We are profoundly social creatures as humans, and recognizing faces is critical to survival. So we evolved a dedicated cluster of neurons whose only job is to decode the subtle spatial arrangement of eyes, nose, and mouth. So what happens when this pathway breaks down? Consider a condition called parasopagnosia, face blindness. A patient with damage to the FFA can look at a person and see the eyes, the nose, the mouth, all perfect clearly. The early visual areas work fine, but the wet pathway can no longer fuse those features into recognizable identity. These patients cannot recognize their spouse, their children, their friends, sometimes not even their own face in a mirror. They rely on a secondary they rely on secondary cues, a voice, a hairstyle, a piece of clothing. Now, the exact same millisecond that your ventral system is figuring out what you're looking at, a second pathway is firing information upward, the blue one here. This is the dorsal stream, the where and how pathway, running into the parietal lobe. The dorsal stream doesn't care about color or identity or beauty. Its job is purely mechanical, space, motion, and depth. It maps the visual world relative to your own body. How fast is that object moving? What's its trajectory? How does your hand need to shape itself to catch it? Here's a simple example. You reach for a cup of coffee. Your ventral system says, that's a ceramic mug. It's a full of hot coffee. Your dorsal stream calculates. It's about 40 centimeters away, slightly to the right, and it needs this grip and this much force to lift. And when dorsal stream is damaged, the results are extraordinary. Some patients develop echinotopsia, motion blindness. They don't see movement as smooth flow. Instead, they see the world as a series of frozen, delayed snapshots, like a dance floor under a strobe light. Imagine pouring a cup of tea. The stream of liquid looks frozen, like an icicle hanging in this air. They can't see the level rising, and they only realize the cup has overflowed when they notice the tea already spilled across the table. So our smooth conscious experience is really the flawless real-time integration of these two separate systems. We never feel the split. We simply experience one unified, interactive, meaningful world. Now, if vision were purely a one-way street, photons, retina, to to the two streams, we would not have survived as a species. The time it will take to process every photon and build each image from scratch would create a fatal lag. If a predator lunged at our ancestors from the bushes, they would be long dead before the temporal lobe finished identifying the animal. So the brain evolved a brilliant shortcut. We call it top-down processing or the predictive brain hypothesis. Instead of waiting for your eyes to deliver a finished picture, your brain uses memory, past experience, and current context to generate a constant real-time hypothesis of what should be out there. Then it projects that hypothesis downward, meeting the incoming sensory data halfway. Look at this slide. Most of you will see a bright, solid white triangle right in the center. But look closely. There are no lines drawing that triangle. There is nothing there. All you actually see are three Pac-Man shapes turned toward one another. So why do you see a triangle? Because your brain has calculated that the most statistically likely explanation for three shapes arranged like that is a white triangle sitting on top, covering their corners. So your brain literally invents the edges of that triangle in the middle. It would rather give you a clean, coherent structure rather than a literally accurate one. This same instinct gives us pareidolia, that irresistible pull to see faces in objects. We see eyes and a mouth in the grill of a car, in the grain of a wooden door, even in an electrical outlet. Because face recognition is so essential to human survival, the brain is deliberately biased. It would much rather make a false positive, seeing a face that isn't there, than a false negative, which might mean missing a hidden threat. So your visual system is a constant negotiation between what it expects to see and what the photons are actually suggesting. And when the expectation is strong enough, it can overact the data entirely. This is the basis of magic tricks, of optical illusions, and it's a key reason eyewitness testimony is so notoriously unreliable, because we don't see the world as it is, we see our brain's best guess of the world. So, we have reached the end of our journey across the visual system. Let's quickly retrace the path we traveled. We began with a chaotic swarm of photons bouncing off physical matter. We watched the lens focus them onto the retina, where they underwent a radical translation, light into electricity. We followed that raw data down the optic nerve. We split and sorted it by visual field at the optic chiasm and passed it through the layers of the LGN. We saw V1 deconstruct the image into a blueprint of lines, angles, and motion. We watched that blueprint race along two specialized highways, the ventral stream, which gives the world identity, color, and faces, and the dorsal stream, which gives the world depth, space, and movement. And finally, we saw the brain weave all of it together with memory and expectation, actively predicting the world fast enough to keep us alive. Thank you so much for your time today. I would love to open the floor to your questions about how we decode our visual world, if there are any questions. I guess I can stop presenting. Is that okay, Adil?
Yeah, sure. You can stop presenting. If anyone has a question, can you please put it in the chat box, or you can open your mic as well. There is one question in the chat box.
Uh, yeah, I may share the presentation of the session if you like. It would be best if Adil, you could reach out to me because I'm not in the WhatsApp group, I guess. You have a WhatsApp group for communication. I'm not in there. Uh, it
Yes,
would
sure.
be best if you could add me there, or I can share the PDF of the presentation with you if you like. We can do it both ways.
Sure. I will forward it to the WhatsApp group or to Abir, and she will forward it to the group.
So there's a question in the chat. Uh, Hallucinations are not all created, right? Like we can only hallucinate based on the things we have already seen. Um, so there is an aspect to this, like you can't imagine a color you haven't seen. Like try it right now. You can't think of a new color. You may uh, think its properties, like you can think of a color that's both cold and hot at the same time, but you can't visualize it. So hallucinations sit somewhere close to that. You can mix and mash the things you have already seen, but uh, it's not possible for you to really come up with something entirely new to say. Tuana and Maria, thank you for your nice and kind words. And also Baran, thank you too for your nice words. Are there any related or unrelated questions you have? I guess you can also open your mics. I think that will be okay by moderation.
Okay. Perfect. Umut, thank you so much for such an insightful. Okay, there is one or two more questions.
Yeah, I guess. Can you explain a bit about how we perceive conscious or unconscious? Uh, so the way we perceive is really a black box. We have made some guesses, and some of them came out true. Some of them are still hypotheses. Um, the way we perceive is, how do I put this? Basically, uh, we come equipped with a hardware from our uh, mother's womb, and this hardware called brain is wired to see colors uh, when it receives a specific electrical signal. It is wired to come up with an color equivalent. With these process recurring every single day through years, you develop what we call cognition, visual cognition to be specific. This process is what creates is what is the thing that creates the visual cognition. You repeat the lots of lots of impulses through day and night, and your brain is constantly trying to come up with something to identify it with. I could say maybe. How does perception work on children's eyes? It's really not much different from the eye part, but it is known that when you are so little, like a baby, the brain part of things differ from a young adult. There is something called object permanence, which is the ability to be aware of this, which is things you don't see exist, continue to exist. Like when I don't look at this PC, I know that it's still there. But when you're a baby, the brain part of things has not developed enough yet. So when a baby doesn't see his or her mother, it cries because it, the baby, does not have the object permanence of an adult. It thinks that the mother is disappeared, like is not in this world. Uh, Till it sees the mother again. So there is a difference in that aspect, but the physiology is mostly the same when you compare an adult and a baby, if you're talking about visual cognition. Um, I guess that's all.
Yes, thank you
Yeah.
so much once again for such an insightful session, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it. The recording will be shared in the Google Drive, and I will share the presentation as well with the peer or Emirali, and they will share it into the group. So, thank you once again, Umut, and thank you everyone for your time. See you in the next session. Take care.
It was a pleasure to be here. I thank you all to be here and inviting me to this session. It was nice being here with you all.